Hi there, everybody, and a very good Thursday to you today. I hope everyone is doing well and having a good start or end to your day. Welcome to this Altenew YouTube Live. My name is Sarah Newman, and I'm really excited to be here with you today and doing a little bit of card making. So I'll wait just a few seconds as people are jumping in. I think we've got a few joining us and hopefully some more to come. Aurum, if you are there, if you give me a wave, that way I know that you are here with me. Thank goodness. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed. While we are waiting, I'm just going to flick on my microphone. I hope that didn't make too much of a jarring noise, just so that we can have a little bit better audio for us today. So I hope people are doing well. I hope everybody is able to be happy and healthy and staying home. Cece, it's nice to see you. Jane, nice to see you there. Aditi and Lynn and Louise, hello everybody, and thanks for jumping in. Thanks for joining me tonight. I hope you guys are all doing well. I assume everybody has been staying at home, and I hope that you're able to take some time to do some creativity, some creative projects, or just just do some fun creative things. Doesn't have to be an end result project, but maybe just some time to get a little bit of your creativity going. So today I'm very, very excited because I've got my hands on a stamp set that I absolutely adore, and I think you guys are really going to like it too. Aurum is saying hello, and she's saying hi to all Altenew friends. So she's going to be behind the badge with us today, which is lovely to have her here. So she'll be catching any questions that I might not get, and she'll also be, of course, showing you the links to the projects or the products that we're going to be working with. As a reminder, of course, if you share today's video while we're live, then you could be in for a $15 gift certificate to the Altenew store. Unlike Facebook Live with YouTube Live, we need you to post in the comments that you shared and tell us how you shared. Hi Sue, nice to see you, and Ria, nice to see you join as well. So if you're sharing, be sure and post down below, and you can be entered in for that $15 gift certificate to the Altenew store. One thing I wanted to point out, usually when I'm looking at this, the website, the Altenew website, I'm thinking of all of the products that I want. You know, I've got kind of a mental list of all of the things that I would put on my wish list if I had definitely more than $15 to spend. But one thing I wanted to point out to you guys is don't forget the Altenew Academy. So these are classes that are like $8.95, $9. They're really inexpensive, and there's always something new. Now, I've done a lot of the Altenew Academy classes myself, but a friend of mine, Tanya Ahmed, just announced today, I think it was, that later this month she will be having a workshop, an Altenew Academy workshop on demystifying mixed media. So if you're ever a little bit curious about mixed media, and I know lots of folks are, that may be one that you'd like to put on your wish list. So that's coming down the pike, and if you get a chance, she's very, very talented and is a great teacher, so she would be a lot of fun to take a class from. I might just sign up for it myself. Okay, so let's move on to tonight's stamps that we're going to be working with. This is the Precious Peony, and I adore this stamp set. I love it so much. It is everything that makes me happy. So I'm really, really excited about this one. Lots of big blossoms. You can see three big elements here. One, which is a half circle on here. Now, of course, if you're looking at this, this can be used as a corner treatment on a card or a scrapbook page. But of course, since it's in a curve, if you stamp it twice and you do some die cutting, you could end up with a circular image or a wreath motif. So a lot that you can do with these. You've also got some sentiments on here. And what I like about these is With the flowers, I tend to think of these as like vintage, sort of retro style. It makes me think of like fabric or wallpaper in an antique store, maybe like a grandmother's attic type of treasure. Just big blossoms, just really beautiful. And I love that the font is coordinating with this so that you've got a bit of a retro font. You've got some bold words here, good job, congratulations, and congrats. And then you've also got coordinating sentiments on here so that you can use them. You can use them together, but you can use them separately, of course. So you could say like, congratulations, so happy for you. What's this one? You did it. There's one up here that you made it. So you could mix and match these elements if you wanted to. This one over here says completely, totally proud of you. So I love that one. And I'm just thinking if you are celebrating graduations toward the end of the year this year. I know things are going to be a little bit different with a lot of graduation ceremonies probably not happening or happening in different ways. It still is nice to send a congratulations card to a graduate, whether that's graduating high school or university or beyond, or junior high, middle school, whatever the occasion is. It's always nice to congratulate someone on that. Oh, before I move on to the next part, can't forget, with the stamps, of course, you're also getting this nice big trifold. And I always like to point this out because I really love that Altenew does this. They're providing you with some big project ideas, which means that you can actually use these for your own positioning on the stamps and different elements. So lots of different ways that you can use these. There's some more card projects in here. And this is a great way to get some inspiration if you've got some new stamps and you're kind of looking at around it now, what can I do with them? Let's take a look at some other options. So like this one, for example, would be stamping and heat embossing these beautiful flowers in a wreath motif in white and then doing some inking over the top of it, and you get a really cool resist effect. And if you need any of the supplies, they're all listed right here. The other thing they always do is include in the centerpiece, this is my favorite, you've got all of your like suggested items that usually adds to my wish list. So you've got this on hand. You've also got a little bit of a coloring guide on here as well. So, oh, I see somebody has been tossing up whether or not to pick up this set. I think that was the comment. It went away before I could read it completely. So maybe you'll get a chance to kind of explore this set as we're looking at it tonight. Hopefully that will help to inspire you. And we've also got matching die set. Of course, this is going to make life a lot easier if you like to add layers and dimension to your cards. So we've got 3 great big dies in here. Right, oh, it's the YouTube live today. A note to myself. So you've got all of these ready to go. So everything is totally coordinated so that you can make beautiful projects right away. So for our cards tonight, I've got 4 projects that I want to take you through. And we're going to be working with some different mediums. So I've got a whole big cookie tin full of supplies to work with. And we're going to be doing inks, we'll be doing Altenew artist markers, we'll also be looking at the watercolor set. So I really wanted to explore using this stamp set with a couple of different mediums, depending on what you happen to have at home. One thing I really love is the obsidian pigment ink. So this is what I'm going to be using for my stamping, for most of my stamping. There's one image that I did in a different color, but for the most part, this is going to be what I'm using. I'm also going to be bringing in, as I mentioned, artist markers, because I haven't used mine for a while, and I was going through organizing, I use that term loosely, some of my supplies, and I thought, oh, I really haven't used these for a while. It's time to pull these out and put them to use. Other thing that I'm going to work with today is my watercolor pan set. As you can see, I use this quite frequently. It's put to good use. So I'm going to do a bit of watercoloring, and I'm also going to be using my little dye inks. So I've got plenty of these. And the colors that I'm using are just the colors that I have on hand that I happen to like, but the techniques can work for any colors that you have on hand as well. Okay, so I think it's time that we jump into our projects if you'd like. So what I'm going to do is tilt down the camera, and I'm going to hopefully position you in the right place so that you can see what I'm working on, and get my space a little bit more organized here. So hang in there with me. You can see, hopefully you can see that okay. So this is the first card that I wanted to show you. Now this is what I tend to think of as a nice, clean, classic springtime greeting. And this is using one of those blossoms with the watercolor paints. You'll notice I've got some spattering going on here in the background. I've also got these elements lifted up on some foam tape. So although it does look quite clean and simple, it's not completely flat. So I've got some dimension in here. So let's take a look at this. And we'll start with our stamping. Let me grab my Misty and my ink pad and my stamp set. So the first one that I want to work with is, I think this is my favorite image, although it's hard to choose. So I'm going to use this large element here. Now these are quite big stamps. They're, 3.5, 4 inches. So they do make a really nice card focal element. Okay, so I'll pull that off and grab some cardstock here. And I'm sorry, I know that there's a bit of a glare here. I've got my top sheet of my Misty laminated, and it does create a bit of a glare, so apologies for that. I'm going to pop down my stamp, just hook those magnets on there. And because I know I'm going to die cut this element, I'm not too terribly worried about it getting being in the perfect position. I'm going to ink this up with my obsidian. I love this black. It's perfect. It's the perfect black in my mind. And I'll pop this down and then just press this. Okay, and there we go. It's so beautiful. It just makes me happy. I just love it. Okay, let me quickly clean off my stamp, and then I'm going to get into some easy watercoloring. And I will be the first to tell you that I am not a watercolorist. I love the look of watercolor. I love what you can do with watercolors, but I use them in a pretty simple way. So hopefully this is something that will work for you. But first of all, just take a look at how pretty that is. Now I'm going to get my watercolor pans here. And I wanted to point out something to you about the watercolor set. Many of you probably know this. I know a lot of you guys already have this set, but just in case, if you don't, or maybe you didn't notice, that you can actually pull the little pans out. And they're labeled on the back, so this one is Lagoon. Now what I did, I've had my set for a really long time. I think this was, like from the first batch that Altenew made. And I thought it would make it easier, make life easier, if I wrote in the name of each of my little cubes. So then that way I knew that where they would go back. It's maybe not that big of a deal to have that information to hand, but I really found, I could organize these pretty well if they happen to all come out, but I was really stuck down here in some of these darker colors and getting them back into their places in order, because sometimes they can just look really similar. So I like to just bring out the ones that I need rather than having everything out on hand. So I'm going to start. I've got my cotton candy, and I have purple wine, so that's going to be for my flowers. For the leaves, I've got bamboo and forest glades. And then I've also got jet black, and that's for some of the spattering. So I've got that on hand too. Okay, I've got a little water mister here, and I'm working onto a craft sheet. You could use a glass mat if you wanted to as well. Got my water brush on hand, and what I'm going to do is just spritz right into the pans. because I'm going to do a little bit of mixing and blending, so it doesn't really matter if they're wet already. So let's get started. I'm just going to pick up some of that cotton candy and just paint this in. Now, of course, the more water I use, the lighter the color will be. So just bear that in mind. I like to start out kind of at the base of the flower and work around. And I'm not worried too much about lines being perfect. I really just want to get some color in here. Because the flower shape itself is nice and loose and has that really beautiful casual look, it's not something that I'm going to worry about too much in terms of making it perfect. But I am drawing my brush along the lines of the flower so that I'm trying to kind of keep any brush strokes in there. And I was stamping onto a piece of smooth white cardstock. I ran out of my Nina Solar White, who I love, but I found something that will do the trick. So you just don't want to work on something that's such a lightweight cardstock that it would, for example, start to warp and buckle. Okay, so got my flower in here, and that's just with a little bit of that, what did I say it was? Cotton candy. Should remember that. Okay, just going to pop this little flower in here as well. And add a bit more color there. And you could leave this as it is, because I think that even as untidily as I've been painting, this looks pretty good. And I think that's just a testament to the design. So I'm going to rinse off my brush just a little bit in this puddle of water and pick up a bit of that purple wine. Now I don't want it to be too dark in here, so I'm going to get it a little bit lighter. And then maybe just add a bit of color here where the flower is a little bit more closed up. Get some more water and just kind of blend this out so I don't have such a stark line between those colors. You know how flowers tend to have different shades and tones in them, so we'll just add a little bit of more color in here. And then you can also come in and maybe even accent some of the lines that are on here. You could go to town with this, but for the interest of time, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. And it's all quite watery as well. I think I'll blend this one out. It's a little bit stark. And that's the nice thing about watercolors, is you can really play with how much intensity you have. So I'm just cleaning off my same brush. And Chris, it's not Lydia who's behind the badge today, it's Orem. It's our lovely Orem. Okay, I'm going to pick up some of this bamboo now and go in to do my leaves. I've got a lot of paint on that. And this is one of my favorite leaf colors, is that bamboo. And again, I'm not worried about having the lines be perfect. I'm just going to get some nice color in here. I really love using these watercolors, and sometimes I forget that I've got that set, and then when I get it out again, it's just so nice to have. It's an old friend, my watercolor paints. Okay, so adding some color on here, and then I'll come in and get a little bit of the forest glades and just add a little bit of color going along here. And I'm working what many people would call wet on wet. So I'm coming back in with a second color sort of on top of the wet medium that I've already got in here. You can let one color dry and then come back, or you can do wet on wet. Choice is yours. And it looks like I've got a little bit too much in here, so I'm just going to blot this off and then add a bit more of the darker tone. Okay, so there we go. Really easy to do. And I realized that I forgot my little buds on here, so what I'll do is just pick up some of that purple wine and just color those in. So there we go. Really easy to do. And you know, like I said, I am not a watercolorist. I am not an accomplished watercolor painter, but just see how easily you can do this and get a really great look. And this is just from, you know, 4 of my watercolors out of that 36 pan. So you could do a lot with your paints and this set. I think it's just a perfect combination. So again, I'll hold this up for you. You can take another look. And then what I would do, I'd probably, well, definitely let this dry. And then I tend to do my die cutting after that. So the reason being because sometimes I feel like if you do your die cutting first, I don't know if you have a preference to which way you go. I tend to do my painting and then I'll die cut it. So let that dry thoroughly, make sure that you don't have any wet spots on there, and then run it through your die cutting machine because of course you've got your die, which is the perfect size for this and will make life a lot easier for you. So then what I've done here, die cut this, and I've got this onto a black spattered piece. Now this is using the jet black watercolor, and I can demonstrate that for you. I know a lot of you guys have seen me do this before, but maybe somebody hasn't, so I'll just do this quickly. And lots of you know I've got one water brush that is only reserved for black because it's very difficult to clean the black out of anything. So I've got one that's just on reserve. So you can see I've made a little puddle of that black here. You don't need a whole lot. Hold your brush perpendicular on top of your cardstock and then just tap the barrel of the brush. So you can see that it's just, you know, a couple of inches away from my cardstock, and then you've got a really nice spattering effect. Now you can do as much or as little as you want on there. You can have lots of spatters or just a few, but I think it really does add a nice effect to your motif that you're going to put on top. So once again, I'll bring this back in so you can take another look. Pop that up onto some foam tape, and I think you can see, if I tilt it this way, you can see that I've made sure to put the foam tape underneath these little buds on here just so that they don't get squashed or flattened. So I've got the congrats on here, and everything is pretty clean and simple, but I really, really do like the effect. So this is our first card. This is just using a simple watercolor look. So I thought, let's move on to the next card. Let me mop this up just a little bit. And again, I'm going to grab my stamp positioner. I've got a piece of my white cardstock. I'm going to move aside all of my watercolors. It never fails. There's just never enough room on your work surface, is there? Okay, and the next one I'm going to use is this kind of half circle on here. Now this is a great one for corners or for creating a wreath, which is what we're going to do. And again, I would die cut this, so I'm not too terribly worried about the positioning on my cardstock, other than I want it to be, you know, so that I've got some room around the edges. And this time I'm not going to stamp it in black. Instead, I'm going to stamp it in Moon Rock. So this is a really nice dark gray, and I find that I really like stamping in gray to give just a slightly different effect. It's not quite as stark as black, but it does give a nice contrast. Okay, let's see if I've got this all inked up. Okay, pop this down. And we'll see if we need to do a second go. No, I think we're good. Okay, so there's that dark gray. And I really like that it's giving another kind of twist onto this vintage sort of retro style of stamp design. So let me pull this off, get my shiny Misty out of the camera light, and you can see it is just so pretty. I love this. So the next thing I would do is go ahead and die cut this, or you can color it and then die cut it again, whatever your preference is. But when you do, you're going to have a piece that looks like this. So if I've got two, here's where you can start to see that they can come together really nicely as a wreath. Now it could also be positioned in lots of other ways. You could cut one apart if you wanted to. You could do lots of different things with it, but I think this is probably one of the best ways to use this particular stamp, just because it gives you so many options. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to get out my Altenew artist markers, and I'm going to be working in blues and greens today. So I'll work with this one that I've already got die cut. The blue that I'm working with is Dusk, and this is B313. And the green is Forest Glades, that's G715. Now you probably know that with the artist markers, you've got two tips. So you've got a thin tip on one side, and that's going to have that gray band there so you can tell exactly which side you're pulling from. And this is the thicker tip. So I'm going to start with the thicker tip, and I'm just going to start coloring. And when I color with this, I'm using the same sort of approach as I do with my watercoloring, which is to say I am not an expert on this. I am not a colorist. I'm not one of those fantastic people that can do like lots of shading and so on. I really just sort of put the color down and then go with that. So many of you will be able to create a lot more sophisticated effects than I am, but hopefully I'll be able to inspire you with a little extra twist that I'm going to put on this. So I'm just coloring this in, just kind of base coloring really. And it's such a nice, relaxing thing to do. Honestly, I was doing the sample, and I'll show you the sample that I've got partway done. And I have to say that coloring was just really sort of therapeutic, sitting down with my markers. So you may be finding this as well during this strange time that we're in right now. Sometimes it's just nice to be able to pull out some supplies that we enjoy using and have a bit of a play. And this is a great opportunity too, if you find yourself getting behind on card making sometimes during the rest of the year. Now is a great time to, if you have the time, to work ahead, either just by pre-stamping and coloring elements, or die cutting things, or just having them on hand. I've heard from quite a few folks who are doing Christmas cards, getting a head start on their Christmas cards, which I think is a great idea. So let's see. Okay, I've got my main flower here. I'll come over and do this one here as well. You can see they are actually, because of the wide coloring area that you've got available, it's actually quite quick and easy to color. So I'll work around this way. And again, this is using the Dusk. This is the artist marker. And again, I'm working onto a smooth piece of cardstock. Ideally, it would be the Nina Solar White, the classic crest. But something that is smooth is going to be your best bet. And of course, something that can take a watery medium that's not too lightweight. So your copier paper is not going to do the trick on this one. It'll be a bit frustrating. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to finish up this flower. And as you can see, nothing special in the way that I've been coloring this, just getting that color down. But again, the gray that I've got going in the background still does show through, but it really is a softer look. Okay, so now I'm going to come in with my forest glades, and I'll add in my leaves. Same process as before, and just adding some color in here. And you can kind of choose between the tips. I'm using the broad tip for this because it actually comes to a very, very fine tip. So you can choose to go with a fine tip on this side of the pen or just take advantage of it. It's quite a firm nib. So it's not like a brush nib that can sometimes splay out and get your ink going lots of different directions. This is a really sturdy tip on here, so it will actually work very nicely in some of those detail areas. And then of course the stem, you want to come along here too. And you can see how easily this is coming together. Now you can do this with other coloring mediums as well. If you've got colored pencils on hand, this will also look really beautiful. You can get lots of different looks from this stamp set, really just depending on the medium that you're coloring it with. And I think that's one of the reasons that I was drawn to it, is because it has so much potential in terms of coloring. You can really pick and choose what you happen to have on hand, what you've got in your stash, what you feel like using. There are some days that you really want to pull out those artist markers, and other times that you want to get a little bit messier with some of the watercolors, or even painting in with some of the color sprays. There's a lot that you could do. I think that this would look beautiful heat embossed as well. And I had to resist and hold myself back from doing that this time because it's something that I like to do and do quite often on these lives. Okay, so then the last thing for my little buds on here, I'm going to come in with the ocean waves on this one and just color 1/2 of each of these with the ocean waves, which is a little bit brighter. And then I'm also going to come in here with my ocean waves and just do a bit of highlighting. And I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm really just following the lines that are already on here, just to kind of reinforce some of those. And this is an optional step in here. This is about as close to the colorist that I get. Now I'm going to come back in. This is again with my dusk, and I'm going to do the other side of my little buds so that I've got a two-tone effect here. Okay, so far so good. Now the last step that I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, this is B201, this is Sea Glass. It's, as you can see, a very, very pale color. And I'm going to use the broad tip on this, and I'm just going to kind of stipple on here. And we'll talk more about stippling in a little bit. I'm stippling on here, so I'm just pouncing this lighter color onto my flower. And this is going to give a very, very subtle pattern on my flower. So this is my twist on things. It's not going to give shading and dimension like you might think from other things that you can do with your alcohol markers. It is just going to give you a very subtle sort of faux pattern. And I think you can see how that alcohol ink is reacting to the other alcohol ink. So it will give you a very slightly and very faint kind of dotty effect. So once I've got this colored, I can use this on my background. I can use it on my card, my scrapbook page. It is a good couple of inches, so it's a nice size, perfect for your corner treatments and so on. So what I've got here, I'm going to grab these elements that I've already got on hand. I could easily take this. Now I've got my craft cardstock and I've spattered this with more of that jet black watercolor. And I could pop this down on here. I love the blue and the green with the craft color. And I've got my, let's see, here we go. I've got my congratulations. Let's see, trying to set my example here. I could just simply pop these elements down and be ready to go. And I think that that would make a really pretty look. But I've also got now 2 of these. So what I can do is start playing with the positioning. Now again, if you're doing a scrapbook page, for example, you could do multiples of these and have a really beautiful border. What I like to do is pop them up on some foam tape. And again, make sure you've got the foam tape in lots of different areas on here. And then what I'm going to do is just pop off a couple of these tabs. And I'm just going to pop this down onto my card front. So I've got both of my halves of my wreath. These little liners are stubborn tonight. Okay, I'll just take off a couple. And when I position this, what I want to do is I want the little buds to be on the top. So you can see here, I've got buds on the top and then just leaves on the bottom. And so what I'm going to do is sort of hook them somewhat so that I've always got the buds overlapping. But I also want to make sure that I'm making the best use of my space on here. So I'm just going to put this down gently and then pop it down into place. And then I've got my wreath. Now the next portion, of course, is a sentiment. I've got this up on some foam tape as well. And I'm going to pull these stubborn little liners off. And then I think what I want to do, it's hard doing this upside down. I think what I want to do is have this be, let's see. Yeah, I think I'm going to have it be right across like so. And then I've got a really nice focal image on my card with another nice sentiment on here too. So really easy to create beautiful focal elements. And again, I really like that I have the option of coloring in lots of different mediums. Okay, so that's card number 2 with our artist markers. Let's move on to another card. Now this one, I mentioned stippling when I was talking about doing the blue on here. And here I think you can even see it a little bit better as well. So let's talk a little bit more about stippling. I'm gonna share an oldie but a goodie with you. So this time I'm working with some off-white cardstock. And I'm gonna pop this down here. And I will grab, once again, I'm going to use this element here, this big flower. This is one of my favorites. And how did I have this? I had it like this. I've got a piece that's already done that I'm going to show you in a second, but we'll step through the process first. Okay, pop this down like so. And I'm going to grab my obsidian pigment ink again. Ink this up. And pop it down. Okay, there we go. Crisp and beautiful. I love it. Okay. So now we've talked about using a couple of different mediums to color in our flower. This time I'm going to be using my inks. So I'm going to grab my little square ink pads here. This time I'm going to use the Coral Bliss, and I've got Ruby Red. I'll turn them around so you can see. And then, of course, for the leaves, I also need to have some green. So I'll be working with moss. So So these are my 3. Now, a while ago, I came across a stash. See how many old-time crafters we've got with us. I came across a stash of stipple brushes. Now, back in the early days of stamping a long time ago, I bought a lot of these. And I mean, you guys, I've got oodles of them. So I found a box. I think I must have like packed them up one time when we were moving and just forgot about them. But now I want to put them to use because they are a lot of fun and they're great for coloring. So I'm going to start first of all with my lightest color, and I've got stippling brushes for lots of different colors, and I tend to just kind of keep them to a color family. So for this one, for example, I'm going to use with my Coral Bliss. Now, what I want to point out is that this is not going to be precise coloring. So perfectionists, you will need to let go a little bit of your perfectionist ways on this. I had to, because it's not going to go in the lines perfectly. So what I'm doing is just pouncing this into my ink pad and then onto my cardstock. And you need to do quite a bit of it, especially if you're working with a paper like this one, which is not perfectly crisp white. But I think you can start to see you're going to get a really soft effect. Okay, that's the Coral Bliss. Let's come back with some ruby red and add some more color in here. I'm starting with a lighter color just so that I get a bit of dimension in here, and then you can come back and really intensify this. So you can start to see it just looks really soft and pretty. Now you can go as much as you want with this, or keep it as soft as you like. So that's with our, oh, I forgot my little buds. That's with our Coral Bliss and Ruby Red. I'm going to come back with more of my Ruby Red because I need to get these little guys. Now this is the perfectionist part, because perfectionist in me wants it to be, you know, fitting into this shape, but it won't because my brush is bigger. But I actually found when I did this that I really liked it, kind of going out from the edges. I just thought it was a really pretty look. So those are my pinks, and now I'm going to come in with my moss and another brush. So this is the brush that I use for my greens. And again, just tapping on that color. And you can use a bit of a swooping motion on here if you want to. And there we go. So really soft and pretty. I really, really like it. So now let me show you what I've done with this. I got out my jet black and did even more spattering on here. Oh, Sue says you can squeeze the bristles together while you pounce. That's a great idea, Sue. Yeah, that's a good idea. So you're kind of pinching them together. I know that you can buy stipple brushes in smaller sizes too, of course, but I figure I've got quite a large stash of all different sizes, so I was trying to make the most of it. But that's a great tip, Sue. Thank you. So I've done my spattering on here. Now, when I've spattered this, I let the spattering go onto the colored flower as well, and I really kind of like that look. I've got my little So Happy For You on here, and I played around with some backing papers. I tried pinks, I tried reds, I tried greens, and in the end I just thought it looked nicer to have it just really onto a plain craft card base and let it be simple. So I really liked having that option with my found treasures, my stippling brushes, so I felt quite good about that. Okay, I have one last card project to share with you. So once again, I'm going to grab my cardstock, I'll set this aside, and we're going to do something a little bit different this time. And I hope it works. So it worked for me before, And now's the test, I suppose. So keep your fingers crossed. This time I'm going to use this flower up here. So we're getting a chance to see all three of these blossoms in action tonight. And I'm going to have this go, let's see, I suppose it doesn't really matter how I've got it. Pop this down. And here we go. Okay. So this time I'm going to do some kind of faux, I guess you would call it a faux watercolor look. So this time I'm going to be adding water to my inks, and I'm going to be using Aqualicious and Olive, two of my favorite colors together. Now with the flower, you can kind of see here, let's see, you can kind of see here where the leaves are and where the flower portion is. So when I'm inking this up, I'm going to take my Aqualicious and I'm going to apply that ink to the flowers as much as I can. Again, not worrying about perfection. Tonight's the night that we're throwing all perfection out the window. Okay, so that was the Aqualicious. Now I'm going to come in with my Olive and I'm getting the leaves. Now it's not going to be perfect because I've got some areas that are kind of too close. They're just overlapping, which is fine. Got a water mister on hand, and I'm going to give this a good couple of mists, and then I'm going to close this up. And we've probably all done this technique in some form or another. And you're going to get a really pretty watercolor look. So you can see that it's blending out a little bit. Sometimes what I like to do, if I don't feel like that it's really gotten enough water, is just add another spritz and come back and do it again. So this is, of course, the great thing about the Misty is that you can come back and add more and more and more. As you can see, I've got some blurring in some areas here. I'm not too terribly worried about it. What I'm going to do, though, is keep everything in place. And I'm just going to kind of tap off some of the excess ink on here. Now, I could leave this as it is. This is beautiful, and there's no reason that I would have to go further other than I thought, what would happen if I added some black ink on top? So this is an over-stamping technique. The trick is that you want to get enough of a blurry line or a watercolor look on here so that when you come back with your obsidian ink, that it will add some definition where there wasn't any before. Okay, so I've just cleaned up and dried off my stamp, kept everything in place. And then I'll come back with my black and stamp this down on top. And then what I'm getting is the definition from the black, but I've also got some of that beautiful blue and some of the green showing through on here as well. Now I did notice that I don't have as much green showing around the leaves as I would have liked, so probably for the next time around I would add a bit more water to those areas. So this is a technique that I really like because I think it allows you to get such a beautiful effect quickly and easily. Is the flower dry before you put the black on it? This is pretty quickly dried, so this one I don't worry about. I do dry off the flower stamp, so I just kind of pat that dry, and then, hang on, then I can end up with an effect that looks like this. So you can see here I've got more of that green that really blurred through there. I think one thing to keep in mind is getting to know your water mister. So this is one that's got quite a good firm pump on it. So I know that a few blasts of water will really cover that. But sometimes, you know, you have a different amount of pressure on your water mister. So play around with that. But yeah, I really do like having that black go over there, and love this area in here where you've got some of that watercolor just really blending in there. Now, I've also got some spattering going on here in the background, and this is the, let's see, which one was it? Oh, it was the Mountain Mist. watercolor. So you could do that with an ink pad if you want to, but I really like the strong pigment of the watercolor. Sue says she's going to try this technique. Oh, good, Sue. I'm glad to hear that. Let me know how you get on. Before you spatter it, if you don't want to have spattering in your flower area, just use your die cut to your cutting die to make a little mask. And then you can pop that down, do your spattering, and lift this up. I did stamp my sentiment on here before I spattered, and so usually what I'll do is I'll just have a little scrap piece of paper over that to mask that off too, because otherwise if you get a blob of something in your text, it can make it really difficult to read. So voila, there we go. 4 cards tonight, and we are just about within an hour. So what I'm going to do is bring the camera back up. So hang in there with me. Hopefully it's not making you dizzy. There we go. Nice to see all of your lovely comments on here. So I'm glad that this was an inspiring one for you. So again, I'm going to point out the supplies that we've used, and then I'll whiz through the card projects again. I'm always ending up after these lives with everything kind of going everywhere. So we're working with the Precious Peony stamp set, and we used all 3 of these beautiful vintage flowers and all of these sentiments. I have to say this is one of my favorite stamp sets. It just speaks to me. And then we've got our cutting dies on here as well. And I did use those for 2 of the cards, 2 of which I just had flat down. So we've done watercoloring with our 36 pan set, which was quick and easy. We've also done some of the coloring with our artist markers. So there you can get a closer look to that stippling effect with the artist markers. And then more stippling with my newfound stash of stipple brushes. Does anybody else have a stash of stipple brushes? Maybe it's just me. I must have gone through a stipple brush buying frenzy at some point. But I also really like this and how it challenged my perfectionist tendencies. And then our final card, which is our overstamping with watercolor. Oh, so you've also got a full drawer of stipple brushes. I think we're in good company then, aren't we? We've got plenty of things that we can do with these. So we've got just another minute to go for sharing the video while we're live. So don't forget, you can be entered in for a $15 gift certificate to the Altenew store. Just share and then post down below how you shared, and Orem will choose a lucky winner. I want to say a big thank you to all of you guys for joining me tonight, and a thank you to Orem for helping us out. I know she caught a lot of the questions and let us know what all of the fun products that we're working with tonight. So thank you for that. I hope everyone can stay safe and healthy through this weekend. We're headed into a bit of a holiday weekend. Over here in Germany, we've got tomorrow off work and Monday off as well. So 4-day weekend. We're not going anywhere. We're hoping that the Easter Bunny comes and visits though. Or my daughter is anyway. So hopefully if you celebrate, then your weekend will be full of health and maybe even a chocolate bunny or 2. So thanks again so much for joining me tonight. I hope you all have a wonderful evening and a wonderful weekend. I will be back again. I think I'm on the 29th. And so I've got some more spring themed cards coming your way. Okay. Take care to everyone, and I will see you again soon.